What's up, friends? Chris Matakas here. So many people do not fulfill their potential on and off the mat, and I don't want you to be one of them, which is why we created this channel. If you are a white belt just starting out and you are overwhelmed by the complexity of Jiu Jitsu, stick around. We're going to cover 5 simple rules where you can get the most out of your training and get really good really fast. So let's dive in. We're going to use 5 rules for white belts as a framework. I'm going to go through each rule and break it down in a way where you can immediately apply this to your game so that by the time you finish this video and go back to training, you'll have a much better idea of how you can make the most of your time on the mat. So rule number 1, remember that you are a work in progress. So here's the cool thing about acquiring skills. In order to acquire skills, you have to make as many mistakes as you possibly can on the way to acquiring those skills. So I find that all of the guys that ultimately get really good are the ones who voluntarily engage with where they're not strong. You go out and you pursue your weaknesses. You go make mistakes. You allow yourself to get swept, submitted, your guard passed. As long as you're acquiring data and learning from your experiences, all that is serving you. It's all grist for the mill of your continued development in jiu-jitsu. So that's where, if we can remember that we are acting on behalf of who we are going to become rather than who we are, and know that we're a work in progress, and just show up with that beginner's mindset and a growth mindset and just do our best, which is all we really can do. If you hold on to that psychology long enough, as the weeks, the months, and the years pass, you end up getting really good. And you get good really fast because we're always walking that fine line on the edge of our comfort zone, making mistakes, acquiring new lessons, and integrating them into our game so we can be better. But the only way we can do that is to remember we're a work in progress. So when you make a mistake next time you're training, there's 2 roads, right? You can criticize yourself, judge yourself, woe was me, X, Y, and Z. Or you can acknowledge, great, I just learned a new lesson. I'm going to apply that lesson to my understanding of jiu-jitsu. I'm not going to make that mistake again, and I'm going to grow as a result. And therefore, the mistake I made was actually a blessing. 2 very different roads lead to 2 very different jiu-jitsu players. So rule number 1, if we can remember that we are just a work in progress, it makes the external resistance of jiu-jitsu much more manageable because we're not bringing our own internal resistance to the problem. Rule number 2, narrow your immediate focus. So jiu-jitsu is so wide, it's so vast, and honestly, like, I've been a black belt for 8 years or something like that, and it's still infinite for me. The best we can do is when you show up to train, have a focus for your training. I'm going to get better at scissor sweeps today. I'm going to learn how not to get triangled today. And I kind of view it as like, it's like that idea of building a wall where every day you're putting a new brick into the wall. Your job as you show up, especially as a white belt, is just to acquire new bricks. And it may be 1 brick a day. I'm going to learn how to do a double leg takedown. That's great. The more you can specify what it is you're aiming at, the more likely you are to acquire that tool, put it in your tool belt, and then that tool will lead to the acquisition of other tools. Understanding how to do a single leg will help you eventually understand how to go single leg to the back or single to double, X, Y, and Z. So the more specific we can get on our training, and a good academy will have a curriculum that you'll be following and they'll already have specified it for you, the better you're going to get. But if your academy doesn't do it, and even if they do, you should have a personal focus where, though there are many unknown unknowns, when you're starting out, there are lots of known unknowns. You know where you're stuck. So just pay attention to where you're stuck, pursue that one thing today, and unstuck yourself, for lack of a better way of saying it. But the more specific you get on that skill you're trying to acquire, the more likely you are to acquire it. Rule number 3, learn how to learn. So jiu-jitsu is awesome because it forces us to be a sincere student in a way we probably didn't need to be when we were in organized education. Like, I feel like my brain really didn't turn on until I started jiu-jitsu well after college, a week after college, but well after organized education. And that's because if you think of like a scientific experiment, you have a hypothesis, you run an experiment, you collect data, and that informs future action. That's happening every single time we train in jiu-jitsu. It's happening every area of our lives all the time. We just don't know it. So jiu-jitsu, by the very nature of immediate feedback, where you make a mistake, you get submitted. You make a mistake, you get reversed. It's force feeding the answers to you, where it's just very explicit of when we took the wrong turn, which better helps us to take the right turn. And when we're training, so let's get specific on this rule, right? Learn how to learn. So we are learning techniques when we're training, and that's great. You need a technique. Like, okay, it's closed guard this week, we're doing the scissor sweep. But it's more beneficial to learn about the underlying principles that make the technique possible. So rather than just, okay, I got the sweep down, you learn how all sweeps work. So that way, while you're learning the technique of a scissor sweep and close guard, it's informing your understanding of sweeps across the board in all the guards. So to the degree that we can understand like the meta themes being expressed in a given technique, the principles being expressed in the specific technique we're learning, the more likely we are to compound our education. So when you're learning, especially in the beginning, right, because there's so many unknown unknowns, keep your ears open and keep your body open to feel where you learn principles, right? Like, oh, if I'm going to sweep, I have to off balance first. Like, that is a useful idea and tactic. It's necessary. Hold on to that. Like, oh man, I'm doing all these guard passes and it seems like I always have to get head to head. Oh, guard passing is getting head to head. Those kind of things. Because ultimately, it's like a bridge. You use techniques to get to a point where you're not really doing techniques anymore, and your body is just a manifestation of truthful principles that are demonstrating themselves through techniques, though you're not trying to do the techniques, if that makes sense. So in learning how to learn, think at the highest level perspective, what principles am I learning through this technique? And then be diligent as a student, right? Take notes, ask questions, be sincere in acquiring knowledge, because to the extent that you are, you're more likely to actually acquire that knowledge. Rule number 4, be grateful for your teammates. So we know that we're only really as good as our teammates. And what I mean by that is that the environment grows the organism. So the environment that you are in is going to determine what kind of organism you become. Your teammates are that environment for you. They offer the resistance that your growth requires. So your teammates are not obstacles in any way. They are stepping stones along your personal path. They are holding you up as you walk down your own path through jiu-jitsu. So I have immense gratitude for my teammates, for my students, for the guys that I train with. And I believe that's really the only way forward, because if you have this sort of antagonistic relationship to the people you're training with, you're all missing the point. Because what we're doing is we're all coming in together and we're playing these like single player games, you know, walking our individual paths, intersecting through jiu-jitsu, and we kind of meet in the academy and we use jiu-jitsu as a way to collectively pursue our individual pursuits. And the way we do that is because, just like that scientific experiment, our training partners are the laboratory for us to acquire new skills. And to the degree that they demand increased capacity and technique from us, we get better faster. So I would always invest as much as I possibly could into the people around me through not purely selfish reasons, but through selfish reasons, because I knew it will be the best thing for my own development. And the best thing is when you find like-minded individuals who are pursuing this thing as sincerely as you are, you develop such incredible relationships that will serve you well beyond the jiu-jitsu mat. But on the jiu-jitsu mat, they will be your accountability partners. They will be your essentially like teachers, because they all know something that you don't, and they will make sure you know it so that you can give them a good look so they can keep getting better. So we do jiu-jitsu, but you cannot do jiu-jitsu without another person. So we really need to be grateful for the people who give us the opportunity to do jiu-jitsu in a safe, healthy way, and give us the opportunity to become what it is we could be on the mat, purely through the environment that they create, through the skills they've acquired. And that's an absolute blessing. So rule number 5, jiu-jitsu is a vehicle for something more. It's the Trojan horse of this whole video. So here's the deal. I believe, and I'm not obviously the first one to say this, but when you master one thing, you develop the capacity to master all things. Like as Jordan Peterson would say, when you climb a competence hierarchy, you've acquired the skills and traits that allow you to ascend any competence hierarchy. And jiu-jitsu is such a cognitively, physically, and emotionally demanding task that when you actually make progress in jiu-jitsu, that means you are acquiring the ability to make progress in cognitively, emotionally, and physically demanding tasks, which is all of life. So I noticed in direct parallel, as I got better at jiu-jitsu, my life got better. And as I got better at jiu-jitsu, my business got better, my relationships got better, my health got better. Because when you really pursue one thing, what you're learning to do is to pursue all things. Now, here's the catch. For most of us, and especially if you're still watching this video, you are deeply passionate about jiu-jitsu. So most likely, you are going to acquire tremendous skill in jiu-jitsu first before anything else. So it's almost like a raft. It's like we have to take this raft and master jiu-jitsu to the extent that we can, because you've got to do it somewhere first, and then it bleeds into the rest of our lives. So what better place to start than jiu-jitsu? But all the while remembering that jiu-jitsu is training the human individual. We are training the capacity to be efficacious off the mat while we're learning to be so on the mat. So I deeply believe that jiu-jitsu is a vehicle for personal development, and the more sincerely we seek to master this art, the more likely we are to master ourselves, which I believe is the ultimate goal. So again, if you apply these 5 rules starting out to your training, you will get much better, much faster, and you will stay on the mat longer, and you'll have a much clearer understanding of what this art is. There's a lot more in that book. If you're interested, 5 Rules for White Belts on Amazon. It's been widely received as useful, which is awesome, because that's why I wrote it. I want you to fulfill your potential on the mat, because we need more people fighting on behalf of the good. And if you master yourself in jiu-jitsu, it's going to show up in your relationships at home, at work, at that random interaction with a stranger at Walmart, whatever it might be. So I hope this was useful, and I hope you continue to pursue mastery to the extent that you can. We will all be better for it. So if you guys like this video, hit me up. Please subscribe, leave a comment, let me know where you're at. I look forward to connecting with you guys, and I will talk to you very soon. Godspeed.